Yeah, good evening, everybody. Respected chair, senior speakers, and all the delegates. So I know I am the last speaker. So if I go to the sunset also. So I'll try to finish by 10 minutes. Thank you, Dr. Arvind Kumar, for the opportunity to share my experience from medical relief at Haiti, organized by Manipal University and AMDA, Japan. AMDA is Association of Medical Doctors of Asia. That is an international organization which is working for disaster management, training, and research. I think if I ask somebody, okay, so which is the safest planet in the universe, everybody says Earth. But you see recent and near future, there are a lot of catastrophic disasters, and it may happen anytime, anywhere. And you go to any continent. Okay, so some continents are famous for typical disasters. Okay, so in each place. And I don't want to go to in detail. So when country or state or the district requires extraordinary response, first responder, that local community, they're not able to manage. So then I think somebody, especially international agencies, Red Cross, will give help immediately. So then only we call it as national calamity. So this is our journey from Manipal to Haiti. So in 2010. I didn't know this about Haiti. I didn't know about the population because I was busy with the preparation of my medical team. But my team members were asking me repeatedly, sir, you know about Haiti and employment, poverty, all this unemployment. Is it not the safe place to go? Then I said, we are a part of medical team. It is a humanitarian crisis. Okay, so and we have to help the people. And this was the first time earthquake hit the capital. Okay, and I think after 200 years. So I came back and saw these figures after coming back from the relief activity. And this happened around 4:53, and Haiti was devastated by a massive earthquake. And bad luck was, epicenter was 10 miles away from the capital. So this really created a lot of problem. Okay, so not only the health, even also economic impact, including the president palace. Because if you see the numbers, okay, so I think huge deaths, around more than 2 lakhs, displaced at 1.5 million, and living in tents around 7 lakhs people. So I think can't imagine how country managed, and this all helped by, I think, help was pouring from many countries. And you name any buildings that was damaged in the disaster. This was our team from Manipal. They wanted a medical team, especially surgical, because lot of fractures. Even in my career, I never seen so many fractures. So I saw in 15 days. So this was all medical treatment for the disaster victims. So even including the amputation for few patients. And damaged buildings. Okay, so I think everybody knows if the Richter scale is more than 7, it is a devastation. So this was really big devastation in the Haiti. And people were in the tents. Okay, so this is, I think, picture you can see here. People are going back with some remaining things at home. Okay, so they're going back to their hometown. So this lady, just around 30 years. Okay, so she was working outside the house. Okay, so and where that concrete slab fallen, and I think we have to amputate both lower limbs. So injured women and children. I know always for the disaster we have 3 groups vulnerable: women, children, and elderly, and even including disabled people. So UNICEF is very clear nowadays. Okay, so please help the vulnerable section first, because they don't have muscle power. If you want to give any material, first go and give it to them. So we could see here a lot of injuries among women and children. So especially they had fractures of upper limb and lower limbs. If anything happens in the night, we have a lot of respiratory and spinal injuries. Anything happens in the daytime, we'll have more upper and lower limb injuries. So this is the best evidence for that. And makeshift sanitation facilities. We have seen the numbers, huge, it is in lakhs. And this was one of the NGO who prepared this makeshift sanitation facilities, and it runs for 1.5 kilometers. And this is the palace before and after, where President of Haiti used to live, and during the disaster he stayed in the airport. And this is some of the pictures. This was the capital hospital, main hospital in the capital. They were not able to get single syringe and needle from this hospital. And you know, after the earthquake, nobody can enter the building because there will be aftershocks. Even the Haiti, they had aftershock around 5.9 Richter scale and 5.5 immediately after the earthquake. So nobody can enter the building after the, including the VIPs. Okay, so they have to be outdoor. So this hospital was there, but they could not use anything from this hospital. So these are some of the pictures of damaged buildings. So banks. So there was a request for me to go and see the Indian embassy. So I took some time to search, but I could not get the building because not even a single building is intact in this street when I walked for around ½ kilometer. So damaged churches and banks. So even in Gujarat earthquake also we have seen all the trees were intact, but concrete buildings had cracks or the lot of damages. So this may be because of the strong roots. This was the airport, as I said, where President of Haiti lived during the disaster. And coming to the challenges, so I showed that figure: unemployment rate, crime rate, HIV/AIDS. Okay, so even my team members were a little scared. Okay, so I think making a complete team was a little challenging, especially anesthesia person. And finally, we got one anesthesia from Canada who joined us in New York. Second problem of getting visa. So normally, I think I really thank American consulate in Chennai. We got visa in 1 day. They said you are going for humanitarian crisis. Okay, so we need few documents and you can proceed. And even we took some of the surgical equipments, which not normally they don't allow, but for us we didn't have any problem. They said please. And lack of basic medical facilities. You know, Port-au-Prince, we can't use any health facilities. So we have to work outside the Port-au-Prince. So that was a major challenge we had. Second was the language. So language is mainly the Creole and Spanish. We don't know single sentence in Spanish and this Creole language, so and French. There are a lot of other organizations working. UNICEF was working. They were taking care of children. World Food Program, mainly distribution of the food. Save the Children to protect the orphan children. WHO was distributing a lot of processes for the disaster victims. Water International was supplying safe water, and International Red Cross, mainly the emergency services, and Handicap International. We know essential materials, what is required immediately after disaster. Here, if there is no power for 2 hours, we will get restless. And here, no power for weeks, no mobile for weeks, okay, so no TV for weeks, no food, no water, because I think this is a different situation in the disaster site. And one lady from US, she was preparing food at her house and supplying in the hospital. So this is our observation. Most of them had open injuries and fracture of lower limb, because the time of disaster was in the evening around 4:53. Every time about to leave or they were in the office. And I think UN headquarters in the Haiti, okay, so there were a lot of deaths. Any organization you name, okay, so there was a lot of damage and deaths. And the relief work was more of surgical, because we are part of the medical team, okay, and emergency surgeries for pre-existing conditions. So these are the number of surgeries we did. And for any disaster, take-home message is we need 4 R's. First is rescue. Anyway, we can't be a part of rescue because there is a separate trained team. Second is relief, is medical or supplies, food, water and other things, shelter, sanitation facilities, and rehabilitation, very costly job. So normally I think country has to take some of the steps with the help of international NGOs and research. So at least we'll know what are the common findings, okay, so especially health problems after the earthquake. For example, if you take floods, I don't think you will get any injuries. So when you take your medical kit, you have to be very careful. Okay, so floods means you take more of ORS, IV fluids, because a lot of diarrhea cases and dehydration. But in opposite in earthquake, you have more of fractures, injuries, so more of orthopedic problem. Yeah, thank you.
My name is Arsh. I'm a postgraduate research scholar at the department here. My question is to Professor Ray, and maybe Professor Vijay Lakshmi could also add an input to it. It's interesting you mentioned Jackie Kennedy and the role of the First Lady in general in the politics of the United States. But perhaps this question will be more sociological and less related to IR. It's like when a country like United States at that power has something like an office of a First Lady, how does it portray towards, say, sexism in sexism in IR, or also considering the fact that there might be a possible first female president ever in the next election for the US? Are they really going to consider rearranging the office of the First Lady for anyway? Like, how does it reflect on a society at that power level to actually glorify a female position more in the works of, say, how to look after the garden or to look after the interiors of the Oval Office or, stuff like that?
Hello, my name is Zoya. I'm a postgraduate student here. My question is directed to you, ma'am. Generally, it seems like there's low priority accorded to cultural diplomacy in general. What do you think, or how important do you think cultural diplomacy is? Or is it just a subset of diplomacy, of any practice of international relations?
Okay, I'll do that. Any more?
Yeah, these are not questions, but these are actually excuses to make Samajit sirs throw a little light on some of the issues. This is regarding one of the classes that you took when I was in MPhil. And this was actually MEM's class, and you took one of the classes. Actually, this is related to the idea of the Shat Puja, and that day you used the idea of immersion of Durga in the Potomac. So let me, look back to the three elements of Anglo-conformity and melting pot, and then the pluralism issue, where you look at American diversity as some kind of a salad bowl, where you become American, but you do not lose your identity as such. And I remember that you used the marriage scene from Godfather, publicly American, privately Italian, or whatever. Now when you said that it might be of issue to Americans when you do a Shat Puja, when you immersion of Durga, where do you think it is going? Because in this case, it is both, publicly hyphenated identity kind of stuff. So where is the problem going towards, and what's the future scenario? The next question is this, because I take this opportunity because your brilliant book on English first. And a few months before, I was using in one of my classes the examples of the Super Bowl Coke commercial, where the commercial came in English and then it was followed by Spanish and a lot of other languages spoken in America. And instantly you had conservative Americans coming out on Fox News and all of these other channels speaking as to why there should be a Coke commercial which is not in English but in other languages, including even Native American languages. So where is this problem going towards, and what are the issues?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Hamsni. And just adding to the point that Sir said at the beginning, in any country that you go to, however pluralistic it might be, isn't it that when in Rome you do as the Romans do? So even when you are in India, if you're not Indian or if you're not from a particular region, it's implicit that you obey whatever happens. So this is not something that is restricted to America alone. It's anywhere in the world. When you go to a particular place, you're expected to assimilate whatever the society does. How apparent it is or how much of outrage it causes is another issue completely. But isn't this also a worldwide phenomenon, I guess you could say, is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, okay.
Hello, my name is Anand. I'm a PhD candidate in the department. I would like to ask Ray sir about the demographic change in the US and its implications for Indo-US relations. We have noted that the Hispanic community is becoming is the fastest growing demographic group in the US. And I wanted to know if there is a possibility of the Hispanic group becoming a a dominant political force in the US in the coming years, perhaps the next 50 years or so. And whether India is prepared for handling the change in US policy after that. Because as of now, we don't have much of a connection with the Hispanic world. Our connections to the West are mostly with the Anglo-Saxon, Anglophonic community. So I'd like to get your views on that.
Answer your question. What's your name? I've forgotten. So, the very office of First Lady, there's no office as such. The very nomenclature of First Lady is for public consumption. The way Jackie Kennedy handled it, it set a precedent. The way she had also made a program of, renovating the White House and made a documentary for that. She was so much of a first lady that the day she married Aristotle Onassis, that day the real first lady, Lady Bird Johnson, Lyndon Johnson's wife, she said, "Today I have become first lady." That lady at long last has married Gayab. Now, in the nation's psyche, collective psyche, Jackie Kennedy continued to be first lady even though she had become the first widow. So it was an unprecedented thing. Not everyone becomes Jacqueline Kennedy. There was first lady activism after that also. You have people like Rosalind Carter. You have Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton was very much involved in the making of public policy on behalf of her husband, and her husband was very intent on putting her in certain committees, certain working groups, despite the fact that the Democratic Party had its own reservations. He did not know then that she would come up herself as a politician in her own right. As far as a woman president is concerned, I agree with you that the United States, of course, should be ready for a woman president, whom at long last it can have a Madame President instead of a Mr. President, and we can have a first gentleman. And then we will have, if Hillary Clinton becomes, then we will have the first instance of an ex-president becoming the first gentleman. So that is there. So the other about Monish, I am thankful that you remember the lone class that I took in your university when I was working somewhere else, and I thank ma'am for giving the opportunity. So Monish, the thing is, when Bihari Americans are celebrating Chhat, they are doing it in public. Or Bengali Americans are insisting on immersing the Durga, they're doing it in public. What I wrote and what I proposed and what I taught you in class that day was a privately ethnic and publicly American lifestyle. Something that Americans would have no problem with. Mainstream Americans would have no problem with. But if you are going overboard with your cultural elements, cultural loyalties, that too in public. Samuel P. Huntington in his book, Who Are We? He uses a particular term, and the ampersand phenomenon, where you not only have dual loyalties, loyalty towards the United States and to your old country through your cultural ties. Not only that, you actually force your host country to become like you. And that answers your next question about that Spanish. That is what Huntington says, and I support him, that instead of learning English, Hispanics, not that no Hispanic ever learned English. There are Hispanics who have learned English, but many Hispanics have refused to learn English. That is a reality. And instead of learning English, they have forced Americans to learn Spanish and Espanol everywhere. Whether on private websites, whether on government websites, you have an Espanol. So he was right in saying that. And to answer your question, that demographic change is a problem. Americans believe that by the mid of this century, white mainstream Americans may become a minority because of the continuous immigration by Hispanics from 3 countries, Mexico, Cuba, and Puerto Rico, even though Puerto Rico is very much part of the United States now. But then, this particular, there has never been a precedent of such a huge influx of a particular ethnic group to the United States, and an ethnic group which has refused to assimilate. The Irish assimilated. When people used to call Joseph P. Kennedy Irish, he said, God damn it, I'm American. I am born in America. My parents were born in America. My grandparents came from Ireland. Fine. So the demographic change is a matter of concern for them, and I would like you to, if you have not yet, then there's a particular book written by a conservative commentator, Pat Buchanan. Pat Buchanan, he has written a book, Death of the West. You can see how he writes it, and the coming of such communities from abroad, Pat Buchanan laments that would not only bring new cultures, would actually mean a demise of Western liberal values. You know? So that kind of thing, and to remind you that not only Pat Buchanan or Samuel Huntington, they are conservatives. People like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, they also did not like the non-English speaking immigrants from continental Europe. They said not only will they come with their language, they will come with their cultures, and none of these people have a democratic past. And they will bring undemocratic elements from these lands. So not only are these people hatred of, if I may not use the term hatred, skepticism of immigrants, it's not a new thing. It was there when America was formed. Thank you very much.
So I think when we took up this task, we were thinking whether to take this task or not. One is, I think, as we have seen, this cultural issues in Haiti. Second is that economic issues. Okay, so as I said, it is very poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. So it was really challenging to work in such scenarios. And language. Okay, so we can't understand the local language there. Somebody has to translate, and we have to talk to the patients. So I think a lot of challenges were there when we did the first international medical relief. Yeah, 15 days. Yeah. That's what I said. No, lot of challenges and a lot of learning experience. And we did only at the national level, and this is the first time we did international.
I have to say first that I must thank Arvind for giving me this chance to come back to Manipal and be with all of you. I have seen some earlier batches, of whom now we see senior scholars. It's been a great pleasure. But I want to also take this time to say some things that Zoya asked me about. What was it, Zoya, that you asked me? Just, I've been following so many things. So the two questions that came my way. One is about what do I think about the lack of a woman president, vaguely, or not having a woman president, and broadly IR and feminism, and the standpoint of feminism as it translates and cascades into foreign policy, and then cultural diplomacy. These can become courses for me next time. Two things. The role played by women, not necessarily, I would say, just don't look at just first ladies, as you call them, but political women in the United States political culture is actually very large. If you look at the first woman who raised the question of the absence of women in the political discourse before the Seneca Falls in 1848, where they declared their, own version of independence, was Abigail Adams, John Adams' wife. She said, where are the women? Because they didn't even give them the right to vote. So we look at a political culture in which all of these elements which go to empower different communities that make a democracy really, deliberate and take decisions, women have been somewhat marginalized, but they have been fighting right through collegiate movements to actually become the power that they were. And this political womanhood, the awakening of political womanhood, transforms not only their regular social intercourse of the status of women from coffee house to the House of Representatives. From there, it also moves you to understand that the actual role that women can play in politics is actually equal to that of women, and they go beyond voting. I have research that actually deals with all of this. You can have a look at that. But gender gap in American voting, today the women are more than 50% of the voting population of the United States, and they matter. So the parties and their political strategies are going beyond the pander zone. You know what pandering is, right? pandering to somebody is mostly symbolic. You give a little here, there, and you've got to go beyond, which means what? It's translated into actual, what shall I say, party positions for women. They've started contesting elections and state elections. There are 2 or 3, theses under me. You can have a look at that. The conclusions are very interesting, good models. Black women in particular found a double jeopardy because they already had a culture within a culture of being marginalized within the mainstream of women feminists. So the standpoint feminism, which internationally became acceptable, also provoked and blossomed, allowed the black feminism to blossom. And that offshoot of that was the black women coming into politics much earlier as mayors, as citizens who would win, school board elections. Condoleezza Rice won a couple of elections when she was there. So things like that. So that's one trajectory that you can see, where you see politically women are playing a much larger role than what you would see if you have the lens called First Lady. So remove that lens. That's a misleading one. It's just a title, and that's not real truth of the American political culture. The second part of politics is that you've seen several secretaries of state who are women. And that is really a powerful position, because after all, as I'm fond of, when I teach the US foreign policy decision making, foreign policy making, State Department is it's like primus inter pares. Yeah, okay, I'm getting a note now. So anyway, so the short answer to that, therefore, is politics and women in the United States is not only a work in progress, but it has been recording progress to the